just don't want anybody out there getting hurt. And my bottom rule when it rains, when it sun shines, etc., my bottom rule of thumb for doing a program is, can you learn? All right, and maybe a secondary question will be, are we having fun? All right, and if you can't do either one of those, I mean, what's the use of being out here? We're just going to be cooking like a piece of bacon once we get out there. You know what I mean? So, I mean, why prolong the agony? Once we get over to the Bryant farm, we'll see what kind of shade we got. We could probably go to Ziegler's Grove, or I'll try to. Hopefully, we'll have a shadow off that barn, and I can put you all in there, and then we can do the conclusion somewhere over there in the shade too. One other important thing, such as LT over here, Lawrence Taylor. You know who that is? No. You ever played? Yeah. Talk about drugs. Who was that quarterback? He broke his leg. Joe Fast. All right, so please take advantage of this, because the park has put this at your disposal. Go ahead while we're standing over here for the next hour and pound every bit of water you got and refill them. You see right over there where those fluorescent vests are? That's all the water you can drink, okay? So don't hoard your water. Go ahead, drink it, and refill it when you need to, especially before we set out. The car is going to, with the water, is going to meet us on the other side at the Gettysburg Road. We'll see how it's going then, but the car will be along the side of the road, so if you need to drop out of the line and replenish then, why not? Okay, how am I sounding back there, Under Armour? Can you hear me? All right, what about you over there? Okay. We won't bother with the Yankees thing. It really doesn't matter. Yankees fan.
You're surrounded by them.
Yeah. I was down at Camden Yards. I'm just doing this because I think all of you are neat people, okay? You're not filming, right? All right? So I'm walking through the stadium, and there's this fluorescent orange shirt. You know those 50 signs where they have the cartoon character and everything? And it says, I'll water it down for you, but the shirt says, Meet Richard. Got this guy smiling there. He's a Yankees fan. All right. Didn't like it.
I like it.
You liked it? You liked it. Okay. What do you do? Okay. You ready? You gonna count me off?
I'm rolling. Just give it a couple seconds ago.
A 1, a 2, a 1, 2. You remember when we first started doing this? You used to have the chopping block. Remember?
I don't know if I ever did.
What do you call that thing?
I've never had to use it.
What do you call it? Cupboard. You had
It's just sync audio and video together.
sync
You can do
audio
that. Clap
video.
your own hands. You can start it like that.
All right. Here we go. You all want to clap together?
Yeah.
All right, 3, all right? 1, 2, 3. And we are live here at PCN. And you're wondering why this crowd is laughing, and that's because you just missed a very bad joke that turned out to be funny. Which will not be so funny about an hour into this program. If you watch the crowd, once we get out to the sun, it will no longer be any joking. So today I'd like to welcome everybody to Gettysburg National Military Park on the, what anniversary?
155th.
155th anniversary of the Battle of Gettysburg, 2018. We are going to be doing Joe Davis's brigade and their attack not on July 1st, as we've done in the past, but on July 3rd. And we're going to go across this field in about an hour, and cross the field and end up at those white house and the white barn over there, the Bryan family. So I hope you enjoy the walk. Let's start out today by talking about the leader himself. There is a book called edited by Gary Gallagher, and it has essays. It's called The First Day at Gettysburg, and they have essays in there talking about, I forget what the name of the essay is, but it's by Robert K. Crick, and he talks about the difficult debut of the new brigadier generals here on this field, specifically the first day. One of the generals which he talks about is Joe Davis. He's born in 1825. His family's apparently got a lot of money as we work our way toward the Civil War, because he's sent to school in Nashville. Any of y'all from Ohio?
Yeah.
Thank you. His father having high ambitions for him, Davis attended law school at Miami University. Miami University of Ohio, right there. He returned to Mississippi and began practicing in Canton. If you ever read about the Vicksburg campaign, that's where Joe Johnson retreats to, north of Jackson. Of course, income came with the practice, and he eventually owned 65 slaves, which is a large amount of slaves, according to the 1860 census. This was an increase from the 39 slaves previously owned in 1850. He's appointed a state senator in 1860. Upon Lincoln's election, he tendered his resignation from the Senate to accept a captaincy in the 10th Mississippi. He was later elected lieutenant colonel of the regiment. Shortly thereafter, he was called to Montgomery, Alabama to serve on the staff of his uncle. And who was his uncle?
Jefferson Davis.
Jefferson Davis. Joe Davis served along aides such as Louis T. Wigfall of Texas. He would later be a Confederate senator. George Washington Custis Lee, R.E. Lee's eldest son. You don't hear much about him. And later, also the son of General Albert Sidney Johnson, after he is killed at Shiloh. Joe's duties were mostly comprised of being a private secretary and not a military advisor. He accompanied his uncle to the battlefield of Manassas and there saw firsthand the horrors of war, and his position required him to attend many of Richmond's socialite functions, which he was good at doing. Terms most frequently used in conjunction with Davis are amiable, unassuming, and agreeable. Another officer found Davis to be, quote, a very unpretending and pleasant gentleman. He didn't like an office job, though, and he wanted to be in the field. That's where all the glory is. And in the autumn of 1862, Robert E. Lee's army is winning a lot of battles. Jefferson Davis nominates his nephew in the summer of 1862 to the rank of brigadier general. And guess what the Confederate Senate does? They reject the nomination at once. You really think Jefferson Davis was that well liked? However, he was finally won promotion on October 8th to rank from September 15th and accepted the nomination or the promotion on November 1st. Possibly the biggest clue, now this sets up Gettysburg, is finally winning his stars can be found in a letter from General Thomas Cobb to his wife on November 17th. Colonel William Brown, quote, told me that Joe Davis had been made a brigadier general. The Senate rejected him, but Ben Hill got the vote reconsidered, provided that Joe Orr would be made postmaster at Athens. So they swapped a general for a postmaster. Yes, and the rest is history. So, the 2nd Mississippi, prior to Gettysburg, do not hear me correctly, was commanded by none other than Colonel William C. Faulkner, the great-grandfather of future writer William Faulkner. However, Faulkner was gone and John M. Stone commanded on this field. Stone was remembered as, quote, a modest, unpretending man who was, quote, gallant and lion-hearted on the field. If you ever go to the old Capitol in Mississippi, in Jackson, Mississippi, and you see the state monument, Confederate monument, reportedly the Confederate soldier on top of that monument is John Stone, who would later become a governor of the state. There's some trivia for you. But whoever he was, somebody's Honda's going on, but whoever he was well liked, obviously, if you're going to put his likeness on top of the state monument. The 11th Mississippi was the only regiment of the brigade. Thank you, Tom Holbrook. We appreciate the artillery support right over there. The 11th Mississippi was the only regiment that had not been engaged on July 1st. The 400-man, some people say 500, man regiment had been left behind to guard the wagon trains and missed the railroad cut action on July 1st. The unit contained 10 companies, including Company H, paging General Lee, 800 miles from home. I get the state fan, which you Northeast people don't know is basically an anathema. They're rivals, okay? All right. So,
That's a southern thing.
it's a southern, no, I wouldn't understand. We mutually dislike Alabama. There's always one in the crowd, always roll tide. Meet Richard. All right, so the 4 regiments that comprise the brigade is going to begin to assemble in November of '62 at Richmond. The 2 veteran regiments, the 11th and 2nd, contrasted sharply in composition with the 42nd Mississippi, who contained a lot of married men. Why would a unit from the Confederate Army raised later in the war, why would that contain more married men? They're running out of men, your standards. You're no longer getting a deferment because you're married as the war progresses. And that wouldn't be the first war. The 55th North Carolina hardly contained a man over 30. What does that tell you? Neither the 42nd or the 55th had any significant combat experience, as I said. In other words, the brigade entered this battle under a neophyte commander with half their troops relatively green and 3/4 of the brigade already bloody from the first day's battle. They got a green commander who lost control of them 2 days earlier. And 3/4 of them have already suffered significant losses back here. On the first day of battle, Joe Davis's brigade started off relatively good enough. They routed Cutler's brigade. I think Chris Gwynn took you out there on July 1st, didn't he? If you had enough heart for that. And they then, in the subsequent Union counterattack, they got stuck in the railroad cut. We don't know. This is just a guess. But one figure states that 232 Mississippians and North Carolinians were captured in that cut. But we don't really know. Among the killed and wounded, 3 regiments lost 54% on day 1. Robert E. Lee wins on the first day of the battle. On the second day of the battle, if you can pan over here, he attacks the Union left flank. We see those round tops off in the distance, right over there. He comes very close to winning the second day. He gains ground, specifically the peach orchard, and 1/2 of the wheat field, if you want to be generous with that. So, what are you supposed to do then? Robert E. Lee is going to attack again. I need not, I could do this whole program on this. In fact, I have a program dedicated to the whole thing about Lee and the planning for July 3rd and going across this field. Suffice it to say that Lee and Longstreet, if they didn't get along, his top subordinate didn't get along on July 2nd, you should see on July 3rd. You should study that sometime. They really don't like each other then, especially from Longstreet's standpoint. We don't know what Lee thought about it. But anyway, Longstreet doesn't want to do it, and I'm quoting him when I say that. He doesn't want to send his assault column across this field. He doesn't think it can be done, but General Lee says it can. And the men who walk up here, they're in the shade back here behind you, behind West Confederate Avenue. The men that walk up here and look at what their objective is, think it's the craziest thing they've ever seen before. But like E.P. Alexander said, Colonel E.P. Alexander, who was in command of Longstreet's artillery, about half the artillery here, he said, you know, we all felt if General Lee had ordered it, then it must be all right. Such was the faith in their commander. And Lee has never given them a bigger task than crossing an open field out here and trying to take a Union position that is crowned with artillery and, of course, Union soldiers. If you think about it, ladies and gentlemen, Robert E. Lee is not going to just send these people across here, though. He's just not going to feed his men into the teeth of the Union Army, at least not initially. What his original plan was, and think about this on paper, okay? Take away what you know about the Memorial. Everybody knows the ending. We do the Faulkner quote and all that stuff, but everybody knows the ending out here. Take away that and think about this in theory before you, without knowing what's about to happen. Lee lines up 147 cannons across, basically along Seminary Ridge, where we're positioned right now, and turning at the Virginia Memorial all the way to the Peach Orchard. 147 guns. How did I come up with 147 guns? Scott Hartwig audited my third day program when I first got here, and he told me it was 147 guns. Now, he denies that to this day, but I swear he told me that. So it is 147 guns. You're in the bar tonight, it's 147 guns. Don't say 150, not 146, not 148, 147. Think about that, though. Seriously, 147 guns. Let's say they fire around every 45 seconds. Let's make it easy. Let's make it one a minute. Okay? 147 guns. Let's even it off. 150 guns. 10 minutes. How many rounds is that? One a minute. 1,500. Thank you. You got a high school diploma, don't you? All right. He didn't go the whole bit. I deserve that, though. He'll have to buy the video now, though, because I put it on TV. That's 1,500 rounds. The bombardment, ladies and gentlemen, has two objectives. 147 guns, 1,500 rounds in 10 minutes, 2,250 in 15 minutes, 3,000 in 20 minutes. It's probably a little bit more than that. You would think, ladies and gentlemen, if you send that many thousand rounds over there, that you would be able to achieve two objectives, which is, one, to destroy the Union artillery. Remember, Southern artillery always had a problem gaining superiority on a battlefield. They never had enough guns, and they never had a good quality of guns as they do in the Union Army. So that's a problem. The second objective and secondary objective is to demoralize the Union infantry. The best case scenario is you run them off too, and you just march over there and just take position of the ridge. If that was possible. Regardless, you want to knock out the first one. The important thing to remember, though, ladies and gentlemen, is the artillery bombardment was only supposed to last 15 to 20 minutes. And that bombardment, as you well know, did not last 15 to 20 minutes because the Confederates could not take out the Union artillery, and that was the cue to start the assault. The artillery kept firing, and they eventually started running out of ammunition. And then it's going to boil down to the Confederate infantry to try to take up the shortcoming. You could ask yourself, and it would be a justifiable question, should Lee have called it off at that point? And there are at least one indication that Lee didn't know about it. Maybe Longstreet should have called it off, but he didn't think he had the discretion to do so. Nevertheless, the bombardment, since it doesn't work, leaves the infantry to do their own to make up for the shortcomings. And never forget, too, the artillery was originally supposed to advance with the infantry. Most people forget that. If you read Alexander's memoirs, he talks about if the camera is the battle line and I'm the artillery, then the artillery would dash forward in front of the battle line and set up and fire until the infantry passed it. You would also have, quit looking, Stowey, turn that way, you're not running yet. Yeah. Keep turning. If he's the Confederate infantry right here, the artillery will come up and they'll guard each side of the assault too. And that's going to keep what from happening to the flanks. Keep that in mind when we cross the field. That will keep the Yankees from closing in on their flanks. That part of the plan is gone. Alexander wrote that he would have liked to have seen how it would have worked. That's why they set the guns aside behind the Virginia Memorial, remember? And they can't find it. Okay. So, 1:07 p.m. Let's get this thing shooting. 1:07 p.m. over at the Peach Orchard, the Washington Artillery from New Orleans is going to fire 2 signal guns. You want to get real specific about it? They fire the first gun and the second gun misfires. Huh. Didn't know that, did you? They have to reprime the piece, as they say. They have to reload it, not reload it, but they have to put the ignition system in it again, and they jerk the second round. When that second cannon goes off, probably only delayed them 5, 10, 15 seconds, then all bedlam opens up. Like a rolling thunder, if you will. This Confederate artillery, 147 guns, starts building into a crescendo. And right here where you're standing, ladies and gentlemen, the ground was vibrating. One Mississippian who was over here behind us in the woodline said that he was laying on the ground, and the bombardment was so sustained that as he was looking in front of him, the leaves on the ground were hovering in front of his eyes. If you can imagine such a thing. I mean, that's how much concussion was going on. It was keeping the leaves up in the air. That's just, I cannot imagine, I cannot fathom that much noise, to say the least. But as I said earlier, the bombardment is not going to be effective. But quickly, this field is going to do what? It's going to fill with what?
Smoke.
Smoke, because the wind is not blowing that day. All right? Or it slowly drifts across the plain right here. And quickly, the Confederate gunners run out of a target to shoot at. Now, see, I had that planned. On the view, right? Right? Okay. There was a cannon shot in case the camera didn't pick it up. What do the Confederate infantry do? They have to sit here. And quickly, ladies and gentlemen, the casualties are going to start to mount. Lieutenant William Peel, who left an account, said, right over here, basically back where you park your cars across the street right there, recalled a Union projectile probably coming from Cemetery Hill, which you could see this neighborhood was not here at the time, but those tallest trees you see in the back, way over there in the distance, that's Cemetery Hill. He said a shell came in and hit in front of Lieutenant Daniel, hit in front of Lieutenant Daniel A. Featherston of the 11th Mississippi, and it must have hit, he was laying on the ground where he's standing, but it angled up and caught him right in the chest, and it exploded at the same time that it struck him. It said that it threw his body 20 feet up in the air. And I got to thinking about that last night when I was sitting there typing on this program. 20 feet's a long way to go. And what Featherston didn't write about, Lieutenant Featherston didn't write about, was what had to rain down on everybody around him. That's what you're looking at. You know? Lunch? In and amidst all this, ladies and gentlemen, is a guy by the name of Jeremiah Gage. What we're going to do is, if I could get Mr. Lou to go over there, who I'll introduce in just a little while. If I could get Mr. Lou to go over here and stop the traffic, we're just going to go a short distance across the street over here to the 11th Mississippi Monument, and I'm going to tell you one of the most poignant stories from the entire Battle of Gettysburg.
Here we go, I'm coming.
Okay, we're standing in front of the 11th Mississippi Infantry Regiment right now, and this is used, this statue depicts their color bearer. I don't know if he has a specific name, but we'll cover those later in the tour. Those that carried the flag, leading the 11th Mississippi in the charge. The monument here was placed in 2000. My original research is correct right there. And I was here. Does that make me old? I was here, thank you. You could disagree at any time. And I was here at the monument dedication for this. It was quite a cool event. The 11th Mississippi Monument being placed so late, and I believe I'm correct in this, I believe this is the last monument placed on the battlefield. Anybody disagree with that? Okay, so the 11th Mississippi being the last monument, how did it ever get here? The way it got here is because when the 11th Mississippi Memorial Association approached the Park Service about putting a monument up, they got the same answer that everybody else gets when they approach the Park Service about putting a monument up, which is what? No more monuments. We have to mow around them. We have to upkeep. One of the big things the federal government messed up on, of course, hindsight being 2020, is none of these monuments are endowed. So it is perpetually coming out of present-day taxpayers' money to, keep them upkeep. Think about reseeding the foundation for the Pennsylvania Monument. I mean, that's not cheap. So, if you look at it right here, what's it doing? How did it get here? Well, what the park didn't know is that the 11th Mississippi had on their committee the former, who is now the former majority leader from Mississippi, a guy by the name of Trent Lott. And so I don't know how that works in Washington, but the phone rang, and all of a sudden we were taking monuments. At least one more, anyway. And so that's how he got here, right here. And they have never done that again on another battlefield. But if you go to Antietam, you see the 11th Mississippi Monument. If you go to Gaines Mill, you see the 11th Mississippi Monument. I'm trying to think if I'm leaving any out right now. But what they're doing now is they're putting them on private land, usually who a private organization buys, and then subsequently, since they're on the heart of the battlefield, the Park Service buys the land, or a philanthropy group buys the land, and guess what? The monument comes with it, and that's how that works right here. So it is a nice monument. Now, the reason I brought you back here is to tell you this story of Jeremiah Gage, and this is hard for me to do because y'all are surrounding me. So I hope everybody can hear me. Jeremiah Gage was from Ole Miss. He was one of the students that left Ole Miss to join the Confederate Army. I actually have not from this unit, but I have my ancestors, one of my distant cousins' letters from Ole Miss. And he talks about in April 20-something of 1861, he talks about they've heard about Fort Sumter, but they haven't heard the outcome yet. And then he goes on to write his father that he compared Lincoln to the Queen of England and said that you would never allow a despot to come down here and rule, a foreigner to rule over an American like that. And he goes on, basically like any other college kid, he goes on to hit his dad up for some more money. And all. In fact, that's all his letters did. He was killed down in 1862 in the 7 Days campaign. And what did he get for all of his patriotism? He's now an unknown grave. What is it, Oakwood? Is that what you call it? Not Hollywood, but Oak Lawn or something like that?
Oak Lawn.
Oak Lawn? Look at
Sorry.
you. How did you know that?
How do you think?
Jeremiah Gage. All right, this is written by the doctor. Apparently when the bombardment started, let me give you the backdrop of this. I've already told you that the shells started whistling in here, and instantly the men were down on the ground. I don't know exactly how Jeremiah Gage was hit, but he was hit somewhere in this vicinity. The medical corps had set up a field aid hospital in a barn, and I have always wondered where that barn is. If I'm not, and I may be completely wrong, but I believe, if you come out here in the wintertime, I believe you can still see a small embankment to the barn, which was right across the park boundary right there, and on the other side of what we call Brown's Ranch over there. Now, I may be wrong about that. Don't go home, tell everybody, go stand on the same side, and don't go over there, because the cows are over there, all right? And they're biting cows. As my daddy used to say, don't go in there, boy, they're biting. Daddy, why does that cow jump on that other cow's back? Well, I don't know. They're just playing. Yeah. I think that's where the barn was, or it could have been right in the midst of that modern woods right over there. Anyway, we're close. Field aid station. Here's the doctor. Early on the morning of July 3rd, I selected the nearest possible cover for wounded behind a raised roadway about 2 1/2 feet high, constructed to allow wagons to be driven in upon the lower floor of a barn and unloaded. He's basically in a bank barn. Fortunately, it ran parallel with the federal batteries that were opposite and the crest of the ridge for about 30 yards. So we can't be that far. I went up to my little first aid hospital behind the barn road embankment, and under its cover seated myself for business. Presently the wounded began to come in crouchingly, for many were killed and wounded before the charge began. The first to arrive, borne on a litter, was a princely fellow and favored son of the 11th Mississippi. I saw in an instant a condition of terrible shock. Keeping everybody close to the ground, I turned to him, and he pointed to his left arm. I quickly exposed it and found that a cannonball had nearly torn it away from the elbow and the shoulder. I made some encouraging remark when he smiled and said, "Why, doctor, that is nothing. Here's where I am really hurt." And he laid back the blanket and exposed the lower abdomen, torn from left to right by a cannon shot, largely carrying away the bladder, much intestine, and a third of the right half of the pelvis. But in both instances, so grinding and twisting the tissues that there was no hemorrhage. I then surveyed his personality, observing the tender devotion on the part of his litter bearers, and I saw a singularly attractive creature. Through his deathly pallor, I could detect a sunburned blonde who in health would show a strong and ruddy countenance, a large head with a tousled shock of reddish golden locks like a mane, with the muscular form of an athlete. Deferentially polite, there was something singular, self-confident, and manly about him, answering distinctly the distinctive marks of the shepherd. Without the slightest change of voice, he asked, "Doctor, how long have I to live?" "A very few hours," I replied. "Doctor, I am in great agony. Let me die easy, dear doctor. I would do the same for you." His soul peered from the depths of his blue eyes in an appeal of anguish that cut me to the heart, and I replied, "You dear noble fellow, I will see to it that you shall die easy." No word or detail of this scene has faded from my memory. There was no thought of the dramatic. It was dreadfully genuine and naturally spontaneous, in the unconscious creating an actor of a grander tragedy than we might ever hope to play. For my own feelings, and as a physician, I can make no disclosure of his name and tell this reminiscence. I called for, and my hospital knapsack bearer, Jim Roll, quickly handed me a 2-ounce bottle of black drop, a concentrated solution of opium, much stronger than laudanum. I poured a tablespoonful of it into a tin cup with a little water and offered it, but before his hand could reach it, a thought flashed in my mind, and withdrawing the cup, I asked, "Have you no message to leave?" It startled him. In a low moaning wail, he cried, "My mother, oh, my darling mother, how could I have forgotten you? Quick, I want to write." By that time, all who were crouching under the low shelter were crowded around, oblivious of their own injuries and weeping silently. I took my seat on the ground close beside him and lifted him over, reclining him on my chest, his face close to mine to steady his head, his right elbow in the hollow of my right hand to support and steady his arm, and a pencil slipped into his hand. Jim Roll had provided the sheet of paper held on the smooth lid of a hospital knapsack improvised as a desk. He wrote rapidly. All of this transpired in haste, murmuring to himself the words audible to me, for I looked another way. He began with place and date, on the battlefield, July 3rd, 1863. He wrote little more than half a page, into which he poured with vehemence his whole soul of tenderest love, never faltering for a word, and a message toward the last, with a name that he wrote silently, conscious of the presence of strangers, but the message was too personal and sacred to him for me to trespass. for it was holy ground. The last line he softly repeated aloud, I dipped this letter in my dying blood. With that, he turned down the blanket, seizing the letter, pressed the back of it upon his oozing bloody wound, and handed it to me, giving his mother's address and begging to be sure she got that letter. I arose from the ground and had him supported. When he turned to me with the reminder of my promise and of his hopeless pain, I handed him the cup, and he feebly waved it, saying, "Come round, boys, and let us have a toast." I do not invite you to drink with me, but I drink the toast to you and to the Southern Confederacy and to victory. And he grabbed it to the last drop, returning the cup, saying, I thank you. We laid him back on some improvised soft headrest, and I rushed off to work among the wounded. In about an hour, passing hastily, I lifted the cover from his face to find him sleeping painlessly. 3 hours later, as the tide of battle turned and the Southern Confederacy had touched its highest watermark and ebb tide began, I passed again and laid aside the cover from his face to find that the spirit of our reincarnated Sir Galahad had taken its flight in triumphal ascension. His death surpassed in tenderness of love and philosophical resignation and courage and willing sacrifice of self, if it were possible, even that of Socrates. People don't know anything about no Socrates. Upon the receding wave of the great charge, came a heavy drift of shattered humanity. Gettysburg, Pennsylvania, July 3rd. My dear mother, this is the last you may ever hear from me. I have time to tell you that I died like a man. Bear my loss best you can. Remember that I am true to my country, and my greatest regret at dying is that she is not free, and that you and my sisters are robbed of my worth, whatever that may be. I hope this will reach you, and you must not regret that my body cannot be obtained. It is a mere matter of form anyhow. This is for my sisters, too, as I cannot write more. Send my dying release to Miss Mary, ... you know who. J.S. Gage, Company A, 11th Mississippi. On the postscript, he has Mrs. P.W. Gage, Richland, Holmes County, Mississippi. Last notation, this letter is stained with my blood. If you get a chance tonight, the original is now at Ole Miss. And if you go on their website, you can pull up a high-res image of that letter, and you can still see those stains around that letter. Pretty cool, isn't it? We're going to step on over. We're going to go to the Tennessee Monument, and we're going to figure out what's going to happen from there. So much for deep, huh?
Yeah.
Then worth it. Any questions? Any questions so far? While the camera's off? Anybody want to do it with me? You got Kemper, Garnett, Armistead. Who's this? Fry. Who's this? Marshall. Davis. Brockenbrough. And back here, who do we have? Trimble. And the two brigades?
Lane and Scales, but they're not Lane and Scales.
Lane and Lawrence. Lane and Lawrence out here. And right here, what we have is, I don't know. We'll figure that out in just a minute. We'll make him the second wave. Yeah? Oh, we could. Let's sit you over here. You can be Wilcox and Lang. No, you're fine. All right. So there you go. How's that? Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we're now standing beside the Tennessee marker, which is a little bit, that was my direction, a little bit south of the North Carolina monument. Basically the right flank, if you will, of Davis's brigade, somewhere in here. Now these colorful gentlemen, which we have back over here, are going to help me. You must really like that piece of watermelon right there. Are going to help me portray Pickett's charge out here. Okay, so what's going to end up happening, ladies and gentlemen, is each Confederate here in this rank represents a brigade. And the brigades, when Lee lined them up, would have been from two corps of his army, basically A.P. Hill's corps and from James Longstreet's corps. The interesting thing about Pickett's charge, there's a lot of interesting things about Pickett's charge, but if you look at these brigades, you got, in no certain order, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 in the front line coming across. Then in the back, you've got 7, 8, and 9 behind there. And then over here, where the gentlemen, move your flag for a minute so we can see the general over here, you have also Wilcox and Lang. You like your promotion? No, you don't like your promotion. So, look at the overall setup of this line right here. These three gentlemen right here are from Longstreet's Corps, Pickett's division. These other gentlemen, these other 6 brigades, or 2/3 of the assaulting force, are from Hill's Corps. The interesting thing about Longstreet's assault on July 3rd is that Longstreet is in command of troops, and the majority of the troops have never served under him before. In other words, he doesn't know them. It doesn't mean they're strangers or they're at odds or anything, but he doesn't know them. He doesn't hang out with them every day. He doesn't know their personalities, etc. To add to the intrigue, A.P. Hill's men, which is this body of men right here, and Longstreet, Hill and Longstreet had only a year previously been feuding outside of Richmond in a dueling newspaper articles that were going on after the 7 days. In fact, at one time, Longstreet had placed Hill under arrest for whatever reason, and subsequently Hill was transferred to be under Stonewall Jackson. We all know how that worked out. So, if you think about it, it's a unique situation. But in Lee's defense, you also have to keep in mind, ladies and gentlemen, that A.P. Hill has never commanded a corps in battle before. This is his first battle. You talk about Joe Davis, we've been talking about that. This is A.P. Hill's first battle at this level. If you're about, on July 3rd, to launch an assault in which the fate of your country rests upon, everything that you have fought for so long is now on the line, who are you going to entrust to do that? Would you turn to A.P. Hill to do that? Or would you turn to James Longstreet, who is your only seasoned corps commander? That's what many historians think why Lee chose Longstreet over Hill, even though the majority of the troops were foreign to Longstreet that day. Does that make sense? So there's a lot of things that start to go wrong even before the assault begins in the first place. The Confederates, for one thing, were lined up incorrectly. It's hard to see with this many people out here. But the weight of the attack, ladies and gentlemen, is all back here. Okay, it's in the center. All right, it's in the center back here. Notice that I don't have anybody standing right here. There are no reserves behind these two gentlemen. There are no reserves over here on the other side behind this gentleman. All the weight of the attack is in the center. And that leads me to believe, well, hindsight being 20/20, you'll see in just a second, they could have aligned it a little different. But trying to guess along with Robert E. Lee, you would think that where you see the majority of the cars lining up for the anniversary moment over there at the high water mark, you would think then, ladies and gentlemen, that the weight of the Confederate Army was literally supposed to go in the center of Cemetery Ridge. It would appear by the alignment right here. Now let's talk about the brigades individually in here. Now I won't go into great detail, but collectively. George Pickett's division of Longstreet's Corps, all the Virginians right here. And always remember, the Virginians are going to write the most about the charge, even though they were only about 40% of the manpower. Thank you, Tom Holbrook, right over there. The Virginians have not been in any combat, and the Virginians are fresh. They got roughly around 5,500 men in those 3 brigades right there, and they're the last complete division that has not been engaged yet. So they're a natural unit to put into this attack. This, though, Heath's division, now under the command of James J. Pettigrew, is a puzzle, because these brigades have been severely mauled on July 1st. Real quickly, you've got Burkett Fry's brigade right here of Tennessee and Alabama boys. They're the ones that were under James J. Archer that opened the fight up on July 1st, and Archer is the first general in the Army of Northern Virginia to be captured during the war. Well, now they're under the command of a colonel, plus all the other officers which they lost. This is Pettigrew's brigade of North Carolinians, but Pettigrew is the senior brigade commander. When Harry Heath is struck on the head by a piece of shrapnel and it ricochets off his skulls, anybody remember why Heath's life was saved?
Rolled up newspaper.
That's right. He had a brand new hat with rolled up newspaper, and it hit him right there and ricocheted. He had a thick old head on him, see? Sometimes it pays to be thick-headed. Heath is not himself. Pettigrew has to bump up, so when Pettigrew bumps up to division command, somebody's got to take his place, and that person is Marshall. Now you got a newcomer here. New brigade commander, not to mention the losses, I need not tell you, on July 1st. Then you get to Joe Davis. I've already gone through that. Look what happened to 3/4 of that brigade in the railroad cut. And then you get over here to this tough-looking fellow right here. I don't know how you pronounce it. Anybody want to pronounce it? Brockenbrough? Brockenbrow? Brockenborough? Brockenbrough. We'll go with the Harvard man. Brockenbrough. For all your investment in bikes. Brockenbrough's brigade is comprised of a lot of units that don't want to be here. Specifically, the worst of the lot would be the 22nd Virginia Battalion. Why is that bad? They were former heavy artillerymen who had been recruited and forced into the Confederate ranks. And they didn't want to be in the infantry. And pretty much Charles Fields, I'm getting way off into the weeds, Charles Fields' brigade, who it was previously, if you went to the Confederate Army, if you were here in '63, they wouldn't see Brockenbrough. They would say Fields' brigade. That's how you would know it by. Charles Fields is gone. And this new commander, John M. Brockenbrough, I'll get it right here in a minute. Say it one more time. Make sure you get his face. Brockenbrough. Eating how can you eat chocolate bar in 95-degree heat? Robert?
Very carefully.
Very carefully. That's right, very carefully. He don't want to be here. So, this unit, ladies and gentlemen, apparently either the colonel was not willing or unable to command the unit or whatever, but as the assault was getting ready to take place, he actually splits the brigade in two. He gives, if there's 4 units in the brigade, he takes 2 units and places them under Colonel Mayo, just like it sounds, and then the other ones he places under himself. All right, and that's how they're going to start out going across here, disjointed. So look at this. What are the weaknesses of the formation? Right here. Basically the flanks. Going back to Hill and Longstreet, how much did Longstreet know about the condition, and Lee for that matter, know about the condition of these men right here? Did Hill communicate with them? Did he not? Did Longstreet inquire? We don't have any evidence of this. Were the two generals still feuding with each other? I don't know. Was there some kind of animosity? I don't know how much that, if any, that had to play in it. Somebody shooting beer cans. Doug, aren't you going to do something about that back there? All right. Private property. They can shoot us from over there all they want. Okay. Well, this is where the little things break you down. I'm going to give you the big picture, so hopefully when we're scooting across the field, it'll make better sense. Pickett, obviously, has the shortest distance to go because he's already advanced, okay? But Heath's division, or Pettigrew's division, has the longest to go, but nevertheless are not told to move until Pickett does. It takes time to get men up from behind these woods and to get them through the artillery and all Anderson's division through here, get them through that clutter and stand them right here where I'm standing and form the ranks up. It doesn't happen in 30 seconds. It takes time. So already when the infantry moves out, Pettigrew's division is running behind. They are moving forward, and they have to play catch-up. Now, one of the reasons I wanted to bring you down here to the Tennessee Monument, you can pan over here to North Carolina slowly as you do that, is this is one of the cool things about the battlefield that most of you probably never noticed before. Why would you? When the advance is begun by the Confederate infantry, these two brigades right here advance quickly. They are told to slide to the right, to guide to the right. Marshall and Fry are going to begin their advance fairly quickly, but where you see that hill behind the North Carolina Monument right there, Davis's brigade over here, Davis's brigade cannot see what's happening. Why? Because of that knoll right there to your left. They can't see the rest of the Confederate line. And obviously then the Virginians over here on the left flank can't see it either. So what ends up happening is Kemper and Garnett are going to go forward, and then Fry and Marshall are going to go forward. Okay? And they're going to be trying to catch up the entire assault as they go across the field. You're trying to get 12,000 men into one line is what you're trying to do, and it's near nigh impossible. Look at this field right here. At the beginning of the attack, and this will also come back to haunt them in the end, these are things that I've had 155 years to think about, so it's relatively easy for me, okay? They made the decision, ladies and gentlemen, that they were going to guide center, which means that this gentleman right here, Mr. Fry from Tennessee and Alabama, is going to be the brigade of advance. In other words, all the Confederate units are moving toward him right here. They're guiding toward the center. Now, I don't know this, but it is, I don't know why they wouldn't use it. There is a fence, that's 3 syllables in the South. Right, a fence. There's the state guy again. Right there. There's a fence that runs at right angles, basically right over here. You can see it over there if you know what you're looking for. It runs at right angles all the way up to the angle, to be redundant, where that single tree is off in the distance. And it probably would behoove Fry's brigade to align upon the fence to keep their alignment straight. Okay? And so what the Confederates start doing when they start sliding over is when Garnett slides over toward Fry, he is going to block out Armistead. That's why Armistead ends up ramming into the back of the rest of the Virginians at the high water mark because he's got nowhere else to go. Okay? So, now you have roughly 4,500 men in this assault as they start to cross the field. And look already how disjointed they are as they start to come forward. As they're coming forward, the general tendency of the divisions, at least Pettigrew's divisions, are to go to drift from the right to the left. Why? Probably because they're getting hit by enfilade fire. They want to get away from it. But at one point, Marshall's brigade of North Carolinians is going to oblique to the right, which means his whole unit turns 45 degrees and they start moving this way. What he's trying to do is close the distance with Fry right here. And if you go back to Davis, to our story today, I'm getting through here. We go back to Davis with our story here. Davis comes out and he's late. Literally the men on the other side of this hill, the Confederate artillerymen said they came running out of the woods. You can imagine such commotion, pandemonium. They come running out of the woods and they're trying to form their ranks up real fast. They got a neophyte commander, as I said, and Davis gets them moving. as they're going across the field, but already they're running behind as they're coming across. And so, ladies and gentlemen, that's what's going to end up. Pickett's charge is not the beautiful thing that you might want to think of it as. One Federal observer noted that it looked like that the left flank drooped. Okay? Who is that? Who is that on your shirt?
Oh, Louis R. Francine.
New Jersey. Okay, any questions? Say now or I have to drag you out in the sun. Let me get my water over here. Okay, so Marshall is going to come riding out. He cannot help himself. When he rides in front of the North Carolinians right here, he says to his men, he says, "Now, Colonel, for the honor of the good old North State, forward." So what we're going to do is I'm going to take the path and we'll swing over into Davis's line and everything. But keep in mind that it is mass confusion as we're coming out through here. We're going to take this fence line. I had the maintenance crew. I want to thank the Gettysburg maintenance for mowing this. But we're going to follow this fence line out to the Bliss Farm. And basically it's going to carry us out to where you got to have good eyes. But where you see those monuments about midway across through there. And we're going to get to that area and regroup. Okay? Hopefully. Okay. Out here in the middle of the Bliss Farm area, and we are now hot, to say the least. This won't be captured on the video, but I assure you that we're not going to spend too long out here because this might ruin the government's reputation. We're sweating. Oh, why did I get it look like everybody would be like, Okay, if you look behind you, ladies and gentlemen, the other way, not forward, behind you, where we came from, look at how fast we got out here, all right? See the tree line? You see the North Carolina monument? You see the North Carolina monument that is right over there in the distance? Davis's brigade, or at least Davis himself, is going to be on the other side of that knoll, or the north side of the North Carolina monument. You can't see what's happening. Davis will write that the fences, somebody was asking me about the fences before the camera was turned on. Davis is going to attribute all these fences, which you see successively up to the Bryan farm, as being in charge of, or being the reason that he can't get his brigade rolling that day. Probably the real reason for that is that he loses control of his men. A gentleman, a Georgian from Thomas's brigade, who was located right over here where you see the American flag flying, roughly in that area, he said that Davis's brigade pushed out with too much impetuosity, pushed forward in advance of the general line with too much impetuosity, is the exact quote right there. And probably that is true. Davis's men, as I said at the last stop, is going to rush out. They're going to form ranks, and Davis is going to get them going. And it's going to be like a horse, a runaway horse, if you will, and trying, after it turns toward the barn, how are you ever going to get it to stop before it gets there? I mean, the men want to get this over with. It's not like they're rushing into death or anything, but they know, as the veterans at least know, the longer they spend out here on this field, the more men they're going to lose. So, Davis's brigade is rushing forward. Coming up beside them, to the left, or the left rear over here, is going to be Brockenbrough's brigade. Okay, thank you, Rob Shoemaker. Brockenbrough's brigade is going to be coming up, and they never quite make an alignment with Davis's brigade. Once again, where you see the American flag, that is the remnant of Long Lane, and that is an old field road, or actually city road, that ended at the Bliss farm right over here. It is commonly thought that Brockenbrough's brigade is going to get to the vicinity right over here where we are right now, where they are going to be met by the 8th Ohio. Initially, the 8th Ohio had 250 men in their unit. They had 100 men that were out on the skirmish line. And their colonel, Colonel Sawyer, is going to go for broke. You have to give the man credit. He is going to see the Confederates advancing. He is going to see the Virginians from Brockenbrough's brigade start to waver, and he is going to take it upon himself to advance the rest of his command, the other 150 men, out to the fence line. I don't know if it was the fence right there or the fence beyond that, but he advances to one of those fences right there, and he opens up on the Virginians with everything that he's got. And when that happens, the Virginians start to waver, and they start to fall back. And that's going to be the end of Brockenbrough's brigade. That was right, Brockenbrough. All right, I appreciate that. And so what does that leave? That leaves Davis's brigade as the left flank of Pettigrew's command. 4,500 men. Brockenbrough's brigade was probably, 4 units were probably around 500 men, so they were the smallest unit in the attack. But nevertheless, whatever that translates, 10 to 15% of the assault force is already gone. And now those Ohioans start to fall back toward that wood line back there, and we'll be hearing from them in just a little while. So Davis keeps on going. Now, to add to the problem, as I told you earlier, I won't go too much into it, because these Rebs, I don't want to faint on me right out here. Right, Sergeant? When they're coming out through here, I told you that Marshall's brigade of North Carolinians at one point is going to oblique right. They're going to start going this way. Well, when they oblique right, that furthers the distance from Davis's brigade and the rest of the line. That means that when Pettigrew starts shifting Fry and Marshall's brigade to the right, Davis also has to shift. There are several times when Davis's line out here during the advance is going to crimp. They're, you know, just like a what do you call it, a yo-yo or a accordion. You know, it goes in and out. Accordion, thank you very much. They're going to come in and out bunching up. Davis will write in his official report that the Union artillery will alleviate this crowding in short order. Yeah, because we're not far from being, if we're not already, we're not far from being in canister range. And the shells will be coming in. The 8th Ohio has some great accounts of the Confederates as they're starting to close in and how the shells would explode among them and so forth. They just like covered in a cloud of smoke as they're coming across through here. All right, so when Marshall's brigade obliques to the right and Davis is over here, what ends up happening right here is when you, let's point you at 45 degrees, when a gap starts to open up, you stand right here. Here is Lane's brigade coming up behind. And what ends up happening, this is Trimble's brigade. And so we got Davis right here. We got Marshall's North Carolinians headed over here. You got a gap that opens up, and Lane's men are going to start to push forward. The problem for Lane, though, is his right flank is going to overlap Marshall and Fry. So what happens to his rear line is that this line starts to get discombobulated because the men who don't have anything in front of them want to go fast, and the men who have something in front of them want to go slow. Does that make sense? And that's hard to keep. You can't practice that, folks. Only time and experience will teach you that. Only the best discipline. And so this starts to get out of kilter as they start to advance across the field. I believe it's the 7th North Carolina, don't quote me on this, but at least one regiment in Lane's brigade has to fix bayonets also for all the fugitives running back from Brockenbrough's brigade through their unit. And when they come through, you know, they're screaming, for God's sake, it's murder, run, run, you're all going to die, or something like that. They start carrying away good men with them because they're seized by the moment. One regiment, if not the whole brigade, has to fix bayonets and march forward like this in order to keep their comrades from chasing them away, breaking the ranks up. In other words, they want them to go around them instead of through them. And that is quite effective in doing that. You are dismissed, sir. You are dismissed. Thank you. Oh, all right, any questions?
What was Pettigrew's target?
Pettigrew's target? I don't know if he's got a target. His target is to align upon Pickett's division. His target is going to be where you see those cars up there. But the field is too wide for his 4,500 men, and he's already down to 4,000 plus what he's lost during the bombardment, plus what's leaving naturally or unnaturally out here. So what does he have left coming forward? It's all going apart. And to show you how quick this is happening, this is what Pickett is looking at. When Pickett and the Virginians start talking about the line breaking and fleeing backwards, and that report is destroyed, this is probably the area he is looking at from over there. He doesn't like it. He feels his men were just left out there, hung out to dry, if you will. But the Virginians have a shorter distance to go, and they're fresh. They got all their officers, all their NCOs. They haven't been in combat. They're much better shape. And look at it. The terrain tells you everything. Most of you have done Pickett's division. A lot of you have not done this area of the field. This is wide open. The Confederates would write that they entered right through here as we start to go out through here. Did Doug get back here yet? Right here. This where you're going to lead us? If we start to enter this declivity right here, this ravine, they said it was a natural killing ground because the Union artillery, Woodruff's battery to the left of the Bryan farm, and all the numerous Union batteries over here behind the neighborhood, they said that they would shoot those cannonballs and they wouldn't hit right here. They would ricochet them down there and they would come skipping over this ravine. So when the Confederates come over this little knoll right here behind you, they're walking right into it. They're skipping them like you would stones across the pond and ricocheting those shots right into it. Bam, bam, bam. And they find the range, and their fuses are working. All right, so they can adjust the range. And once they get the range, they just keep adjusting and throwing the shells in there. Bam, 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 bam. And as they get closer, obviously, we'll switch over to canister. Any questions? If I could I get the Johnnies, the color guard, to go over here and form up with Ranger Doug, he's the Yankee on the bicycle right over here, and he is going to lead us to shelter.